Hello, everyone, and welcome to what will be a different episode of Wahconah Weekly. Not quite like the others. As you can probably notice from the time of the video, it is significantly longer than our usual 6 to 12-minute episodes. What we've decided to do this week, being February vacation, we have no news to cover from the school. So instead, we've compiled information between interviews, B-roll, and other bits of research we've done on the school building project that will be coming up that will be voted on in early April this year. And so what we've done is we've collected as much information as we can about problems with the school, issues it's facing, and teachers' general opinions about the building project and the general areas they work in. And we've compiled that into about an hour-long video. We'll have timestamps in the description for you to get to those points in certain interviews much faster than just having to sit through the whole video.
Yeah. And now let's hand it off to Mr. Robb.
All right, and we're here with Robb, principal of Wahconah Regional High School, to talk about some ongoing issues regarding the school building project, whether they be with the school's design or concerns that some people may have with the actual project. So a concern some people have had is that over the years, Berkshire County has been experiencing a lessening of its population, namely in children going to school. So with this happening, would you say that there's good reason to build a new school despite less and less kids coming to the school?
This school is going to be built based on our projected enrollment. So right now we have 530 students at Wahconah. If this school's built and if we remain on timeline, first of all, voters have to pass it on April 6th. If we remain on timeline, we could open up in the fall of 2021. We would still have about 500 students attending Wahconah, but our population is expected to decline, and we are planning for a school that's going to be slightly smaller in terms of student population. We're also, as part of the what's called the MSBA process, the Mass School Building Authority, they really push you to go with conservative estimates regarding population increase or decline, because they don't want you to build a school that's going to have excessive waste or wasted space in it.
Oh, definitely.
So that's one thing. However, this school is also going to be built with what I call a Plan B. And a Plan B is some plans on paper that won't result in brick and mortar yet, but plans on paper should we ever have the opposite happen, a population influx. So right now, there's what I call two-story academic pods. There's plans, if we were ever to say, have a population influx. Let's just argue that Amazon chose Pittsfield as its headquarters or something. We would end up having a third academic pod, and you have to leave space on the property for that.
And that way, say, if the population did manage to increase, you'd have plenty of room to work with that.
That's right.
But also that the design isn't highly expecting of a large amount of children to come in, thus it isn't being set up to be too large for what you're getting.
So right now, the way we're trending is the number of students that live in Central Berkshire are slowly declining. The number of students that are choicing into Wahconah are on a slight increase every year. For instance, last year we had 67 school choice students at Wahconah. This year we have 72. So the trend is up for school choice. The trend for district enrollment is down.
So would you say in a way it will look like it might even sort of even out as the school choice increases if the trend continues?
The thing you can't control is school choice. So I don't know if it will even out. I don't know if we'll...
But the decline won't be so severe.
It's not going to be as sharp as I think everyone's predicting.
That's good. So between other schools, what would you say, how would you compare the pricing of this new school building project to other schools?
So the other two projects that are most prevalent in people's minds right now in our area are Taconic and Mount Greylock. I caution people in comparing the pricing, in part because these are three distinctly different schools. Mount Greylock was built as a middle high school, and it was also an addition renovation. So they held on to their auditorium and gymnasium and then got rid of the academic wing and built a whole new one, along with a cafeteria and a few other things. That project ended up being about, I think it was around $65 million total. Don't quote me on it. Taconic was built to house Pittsfield Public Schools vocational programming, although it's not a completely vocational school and there's plenty of college prep programming as well. Its design, Taconic's is 100,000 square feet bigger than what the new Wahconah is supposed to be. Its design is taken up very much by large auto lab bays and shops and things like that. And I believe that cost came in somewhere around 120 million, if I could be off a little bit. Our ballpark figure right now is 70 to 74 million, and that number won't be shored up to a definite number until after Valentine's Day, when there's a big meeting to kind of tighten up the cost. But the projects aren't comparable. We're a 9 through 12 comprehensive high school. Taconix's a 9 through 12 with a heavy emphasis on voc, and Mount Greylock's a middle high school.
And Taconic had definitely a more expensive reconstruction program because they had to get tools for said auto labs and such things, I would assume.
I've been in it several times, mid-construction all the way up to being finished, and a lot of cost went into their vocational equipment.
Alongside a shortening of population here in the Berkshires, the economy has admittedly been not so hot as some would say. And so money is becoming a little bit more short than it would have been 20 or 30 years ago. And so along with that, and already high taxes currently in Dalton, what about this project would you say is very integral despite the tax increases? And will the tax increases be that severe if you know that?
So we're going to have a far better projection on tax increases after the final price is solidified on February 14th. But right now, if we were to do an estimate, Dalton has about 65% of the students here, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so Dalton's going to have a burden of about 65% of the cost. Keeping in mind that if, let's say, the total cost of this building was $74 million, with state reimbursements, the district's only going to have to pay about $44 million of that 74.
That's significantly
so the state
less.
will pick up about, let's say, $30 million worth of the cost. That's important to remember.
Yeah.
That being said, Dalton will pick up 65% of that $44 million. And for the average Dalton homeowner, that would be a tax increase annually of about $500 or so. If I do the math correctly, depending on where you get your coffee, that's like a cup of coffee a day. That's how I look at it.
That's pretty good. And it makes sense considering how, like you said, Dalton supplies a vast majority of the students going, that it wouldn't make sense for a hill town to pay a massive piece of the tax money.
And that's how regional school district agreements work.
Some people have suggested that as opposed to building a completely new school, you simply repair the current one. What would you say would make building a new school much more worth it than just repairing this current one that we're in right now?
This building isn't going to benefit from just a new roof and a paint job. There are a lot of significant issues, particularly with the plumbing, the heating, and also, quite frankly, the learning spaces and the way this building was constructed. This building was constructed for a mid-20th century education where our students were expected to sit, listen, as the teacher delivers the instruction for 50, 60 minutes. The way the classrooms are constructed and so on and so forth. So the new design addresses the fact that we're trying to create more of a 21st century learning experience for our students. The other thing is that this building in many aspects is not ADA compliant, Americans with Disabilities Act, and we are having to continually work around a lot of the obstacles within this building, not only to accommodate various people, but also just to deliver an education.
There is a rather steep ramp in A-Hall, is there not, that has proved to be difficult with people who use wheelchairs, I've heard.
Yeah, and that ramp, once again, I don't know the structural reasoning for the ramp when it was built way back when, but the fact of the matter is, if you are a student in a wheelchair, even though we have a lift that takes you down to the tech ed area, or we have a lift that takes you up onto the stage, a new construction would have far more seamless integration of those sorts of structures that would allow you to just seamlessly transfer from one part of the building to the other without having to go through all the process to actually do that.
So it would be much more effective for people who may have trouble with the current building design because it was not built with people with disabilities in mind. And you would also say that the classrooms are a bit archaic and don't really match what we're reaching for?
Yeah, they are. The other thing is this building was not built to accommodate privacy. We now have the way we do guidance counseling and the way in which myself or Mr. Messina meets with students, or the way in which Mrs. Therian does counseling at the school adjustment counselor's office, and even the way the nurse delivers her services. In the old days, privacy was not an issue because a lot of the discipline and a lot of the things that were dealt with were dealt in the public in front of everybody. That's just the way it was. Yeah. And the reality is now is that we need to have far more one-on-one private conversations with students, families, and so on and so forth. And we just don't have proper spaces to do that.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that several of the rooms, for example, the nurse's office, feels strangely cramped and hidden away. Most other modern schools would have it be a lot more easily accessible, and it would probably be more soundproofed in case any conversations have to be had in there that no one else should be hearing.
Yep. One of the aspects of the new design was, and one of the things that bothers me about this school is that, for instance, if you're called to the assistant principal's office and you walk into Mr. Messina's office, if kids are walking by, they know you're going to the assistant principal. If you need to seek mental health counseling with Mrs. Therian and you take a right or a left into room A10, everybody knows you're going in there for mental health help. So in the new design, we've created what's called a student support center that has one administrative assistant at the door that's kind of the gatekeeper, that inside has assistant principal, school psychologist, school adjustment counselor, guidance counselor, and nurse. It's a student support center. It's all encompassing. That way, when students come in from the rest of the school, you could be in there for multiple reasons.
More mysterious.
You could be going in because you've got a stomach ache. You could be going in because you're severely depressed. You could be going in because you want to look at a new college with Mrs. Grady.
Thus, there's less pressure and people feel less embarrassed and thus less stigma, you would
Absolutely.
say.
Yep.
All right. So what is your opinion on the idea of just simply repairing the school as opposed to building a new one? What is your opinion?
I do have a personal opinion, and it's important to understand it is my personal opinion. It ultimately ended up being the one that the school building committee predominantly shared as well. I went into this process very much committed to this particular building and kind of had a pie in the sky notion of what renovation would be like without ever having experienced a school renovation or rebuild in my life, and never will again. I went to school here. I've taught here. This is, I consider this my home away from home, and I'm talking about this personally, but there's other staff members that feel the same way. I feel very much attached to this, quite frankly, unique building. But in the process of going through what would need to be done to renovate versus rebuild, and when I started to think less about my own feelings and more about the families and the community that would benefit from a new building, I came to the realization that there are some things, even though you love it, you just have to let go. And I came to the realization that that's what I think needs to happen here.
So you definitely didn't come in saying, I want to build a new building. You were trying to see what you could do.
I personally came into this feeling the exact opposite way, that I would love to be able to hold on and have a kind of a sentimental feeling about this place. But I came to the realization, I just don't think it's feasible.
It's just not economically viable as opposed to rebuilding.
Yeah, and educationally in terms of what we want to do. I don't like the fact that Mr. Dahari has to have physics class in the hallway. And in the new building, we wouldn't have to do that.
And that would be a great
Just
adjustment.
as an example.
So you had mentioned that the building currently has problems, and you brought up a few of them, but could you elaborate further on some of the other existing issues with the building's design and its structure?
One of the big burning questions out there is, why are you building new when you could simply renovate? And the problem with the idea of simply renovating is the word simply. It wouldn't be simple, and we wouldn't necessarily get our biggest bang for the buck in terms of state reimbursements. The school building committee actually looked at 13 different options that included both new construction and renovation. And each time the school building committee met, it narrowed its choices down until we basically had, I believe it was 2 renovation options and 2 new construction options. And it became a bit of a no-brainer regarding new construction for 2 reasons. One is the amount of state reimbursement that we would get. For instance, if we renovated, we would be living inside a construction zone. So we would need to move students around. We would need to get temporary classrooms, portable classrooms to put around the building.
And that would make scheduling extremely difficult, I'd imagine.
Well, the biggest issue is the state won't reimburse temporary classrooms, which would be a major cost. The other reason why renovation is a tougher choice is it would drag out the timeline of the construction, whereas it would take about 3 to 3.5 years to completely renovate the building to where it needs to be. That means that there would be some class that would experience their entire high school experience at Wahconah in a construction zone. Also, there's been situations where those sorts of things have happened in other districts where families have taken their kids elsewhere because they don't want their kids to experience that. New construction, it would take place over on the baseball field. We could do business as usual in this building. We can teach on until we no longer need it. And then when the new building is completed over there, we could simply move in. And when we move in, then this would be taken down. So they can put up a new building over on the baseball field in about 18 months.
So it'd be much more efficient, and it would be less in everyone's way.
Yep. And it would be built to suit. It would be built to exactly the specs that we need.
That would be much more effective money-wise.
Right. Yep.
And also, a common complaint you may even hear about in the building is regarding asbestos, as this building is built from the 1950s, am I correct?
It's 1950s technology in a 1961 building.
Yeah. So there's a lot of asbestos that isn't as accessible, but it's still within the building. We have heard before that removing asbestos can sometimes be more expensive than just constructing a new building. Is that the case?
I don't know the specifics of it, but I do know there's two things. The minute the phrase I use is the minute you put a hammer in the wall to renovate the building, there's two very costly things you're going to have to do. You're going to have to make it ADA compliant, Americans with Disabilities Act. Mm-hmm. So if you think about the different parts of this building that aren't ADA compliant, and the second thing is that you would have to remove all asbestos. And that's just not what they use to wrap the heating pipes with. It's also asbestos tile on the floor as well. So yeah, it would be a costly endeavor. I don't know the specifics.
It'd be costly and possibly even threatening to some, depending.
Well, I mean, they would do it the right way, but the problem is that it would be a painstaking process.
Especially with renovations, since kids would be having to move through the school, it would be extremely difficult to make sure it's contained.
Yeah, they would keep it. I'm sure they would keep it safe, but it would be definitely difficult. It'd be a difficult proposition for sure.
What are some of the most substantial benefits that will come from this new school design that is planned?
There are many. One of the big upgrades is that we learned through this process that our gym is undersized for our school and below state standards in terms of size. It's about 9,300 square feet right now. So we'd be looking at 11,000 square foot gym, plus 3,000 additional square feet for fitness and weight rooms. And what we did is we took that square footage and split it in half. So there would be a 1,500 square foot fitness CrossFit room that could also be used for yoga and that sort of thing. And then there would be a separate 1,500 square foot weight room. So in terms of PE and athletics, we would benefit so that nobody has to go to the basement of the DYC to lift anymore, and we don't have to do yoga in the hallway or on stage and that sort of thing. We would also be able to have both varsity and JV teams, like girls basketball and boys basketball. They could practice here by just dividing the gym. And they would still have full courts going across, as well as, obviously the main court going from in the other direction. Yeah. One of the things that I'm really excited about is right now we have 7 science teachers in 1 lab that is woefully under standards in the state. This new design would have 5 fully equipped 1,400 square foot science classrooms. So each classroom would have obviously the classroom piece to it, and then it would also each have its own lab.
So then now you could actually engage in much
That's
more
right,
of their
and then
activity.
we would schedule the rooms so that the 7 teachers could share the 5 rooms. And they'd be huge rooms and beautiful rooms. The other thing that I'm excited about with the new design is a state-of-the-art auditorium, as opposed to what we have.
The ancient one.
Yeah, and the auditorium was a big conversation, and the school building committee rallied around the notion of having a full-sized auditorium. Right now we have 650 seats in an inadequate auditorium. The new design, there's 550 seats in a state-of-the-art auditorium with a real sound booth and lighting booth in the back, in the back center. and handicap accessibility and that sort of thing. The state doesn't like to reimburse on big spaces that aren't going to be used all the time. We could justify the gym being used all the time because of PE classes, but in the auditorium you can't justify that. So the state doesn't like to reimburse as much, but we still pushed to get the extra.
So the auditorium shouldn't be woefully small, but it will be somewhat small.
It'll be somewhat smaller, but it'll still be able to fit the entire school and staff for assemblies, and still be able to have major performances in there and so on and so forth. And it's going to be beautiful. The other thing is that our fine and performing arts area, we're going to gain an additional art room, which I think is going to be huge. It may actually kind of impact what we offer here in a positive way. We're also going to have chorus in a classroom where it belongs as opposed to in the auditorium. So we're going to have a hybrid band chorus room, and the band chorus areas around that for music tech, music production, will be set up off to the side behind the auditorium with band and chorus. It's going to be a really neat setup. A lot more privacy, I mentioned in one of the other segments in terms of counseling and helping students. And the Student Support Center, to me, is one of the neatest options that we have in this particular project. The library will no longer be called the library. It will be the Learning Commons, and it will be sitting up on the second floor in between the two pods, and it will be the academic heart of the building. It's going to be gorgeous. I mean, the way some of the ideas that they have around it, it's going to be pronounced. If you're in the back of the building looking at the school, you're going to be able to see, oh, that's the Learning Commons, even from the outside, which is pretty neat. We're going to gain what I call collaborative breakout spaces for students. So the classroom designs are going to be such that there's going to be classrooms surrounding kind of an open collaborative space that kids can go out and work on projects and in small group activities out in that area. It's not a hallway, it's an actual learning space. Finally, in the outdoors, since we're going to have a two-story building, we're actually going to gain an extra playing field outside, so we can finally accommodate sports like lacrosse. We'll gain an extra rectangular field, which will be good.
So with the new building design, many classes, many sports, many other activities will finally be getting the attention that they need to fully have the quality people would like them to have.
Athletically and academically, we're finally going to be able to meet the needs of the programming that we currently have.
That's very good to hear. Considering how we're moving forward and in time, and now the school is meant to be designed for the 21st century, how would technology be incorporated into this new school's design?
Well, as you know, we have a one-to-one Chromebook initiative that started this year that would carry over into the new building. The Wi-Fi capability in the building, though I don't fully understand the mechanics of it, you always want to design the capabilities of the building years ahead of what you're currently using. So my understanding is that's what they're planning around. What that means technically, I don't know. But obviously, you're going to have a lot of new equipment. You're not going to see us bringing old stuff into the new building. So there's going to be a lot of new equipment, particularly in the area of IA Tech, in some of the stuff that Mr. Pike does, but also in fine and performing arts. There's going to be a lot of new equipment, certainly in the PE area with the weights and fitness area, a lot of new equipment as well. And some of that will have technological capabilities, obviously. The other thing is, I think you're going to see, and I know students walk by them and don't pay attention, but you're really not going to see bulletin boards anymore. The things that you post, nobody really sees those anymore. You're going to have a lot more, I think, monitors with scrolling announcements and advertisements, if you want to call them that, about the upcoming bake sale or whatever the case may be.
That way, like, different announcements can get more space, and because it's a monitor and it can switch, it still displays the same amount of information.
So there'll be a visual presence of that. And there's still a lot of talk as to how much of that we're going to have, but that's something that you'll see in a new design. The other thing is that I'm really excited about is just off of the Learning Commons, really attached to the Learning Commons, is going to be a fully equipped makerspace, which is, we're kind of keeping the thoughts around that open-ended right now, and if the vote passes, we can start getting into specific design. But that's something that some untapped potential, I think, that among our students that I think they'll take advantage of there.
Could exactly go on within this maker space, do you think?
I do hope that students who access the Learning Commons, whether it's during their DLT or even after school or whatever the case may be, will be able to go in and kind of work, quite frankly, on what I call passion projects, things that they really feel that aren't necessarily connected directly to their assignments or the curriculum, but things that they'd like to kind of tinker with and mess with and work on their own.
And that relates back to the increasing of quality of life.
Yeah, yeah.
What are some of the new opportunities that this school will bring for both teachers and students alike?
I think it's going to be a more comfortable space overall for both students and staff. Certainly the heating will be better. There will also be air conditioning, which I failed to mention. So, you know, I don't want to go down the climate change road too much here, but the reality is that we seem to be getting larger temperature swings as far as cold and heat goes, and the building is going to address that with a state-of-the-art, heating and cooling system, and there will be cooling in the vast majority of the building as it stands right now. The other thing is in the tech ed spaces, the spaces that Mr. Pike sometimes works in, Mr. Ostrander, Mr. Utz, they're going to have state-of-the-art spaces to work in, as opposed to, for instance, what Mr. Pike's trying to do right now is to run video game design and robotics out of an old metal fabrication shop. He'll have a space that's appropriate for his programming. The fine and performing arts, I think, benefit greatly. Not only are we going to have, like I said before, 2 art rooms. Mrs. Caponia will finally have a kiln room that she's been hoping for. But the band and chorus spaces will not only be appropriate for them, but even our drama club will have better storage, appropriate storage, I should say, a place where there's a dressing room and that sort of thing, easy access to the stage. The other thing that I think is the thing that I keep coming back to is the Student Support Center. The idea that we're going to have the assistant principal, school adjustment counselor, school psychologist, guidance counselors, nurse, all in one area, spread out obviously, but that students will be able to access that without having feeling stigmatized by going into Mr. Messina's office or going into Mrs. Therian's office. We won't have that issue in this new design.
So you definitely say one of the biggest positives to this new design would be just general quality of life increase on a large scale.
Yeah, and that was one of the things. We went through this very extensive visioning process to inform the design, and it was 2 days worth of 40 community members. And when I say community, I'm talking about teachers, students, parents, random community members that got involved, the design team, the building committee, and so on, and creating an environment where you have kids that come from 7 different towns, that some of them have a bus ride of upwards of an hour to get here, and spend 12 to 13 hours a day here. If you're in drama, we know that's the case. We know if it's athletics, that's the case. We want a place that kids can kind of feel like it's a home away from home in terms of comfort, but at the same time be a school. And that was very, very important.
So since we talked about some of the gains from the new school design, what might we lose with this new school?
We're going to lose 3 things. In terms of academic programming, we will lose Auto Lab. There will not be a new Auto Lab in the new building. Right now, Auto Lab meets 2 periods a day. It's a semester-based course, and it services somewhere in the realm of 25 to 30 students per semester. The upside is we'll have the same staffing, so we will be able to offer some new IA Tech type of courses to replace those 2 blocks. I know one of the things we're looking at is to expand upon some of the things that go on in construction tech as a course, pulling some of the units out of that and expanding them into semester-based courses, which we're excited about. But we will lose an auto lab. It's important to understand that. What we will also lose, if you are a fan of 1-story living, you will lose that because it'll be a 2-story building. The academic wing will be a 2-story building. And if you're a fan of our courtyards, there won't be a courtyard. What they've decided to do in the design, though, is to create basically kind of a back plaza out the back of the building that I actually think will be far nicer than what we have now. So we could still do senior privilege lunch and some of the other things that we use the courtyards for, particularly the one currently off of the cafeteria. We'll still be able to have that same type of function.
So would you say it'd be more effective space-wise and also usage-wise would probably be better and more accessible than our current courtyard?
Yeah, the building's going to efficiently use space, that's one of the reasons why there's no courtyard in the design. But the outdoor space, I think, will be more flexible because it will lead you to the outdoors.
Is there any particular information regarding dates, meetings, other information that will be coming out soon that you'd like to get out to anyone watching?
The next meeting of the school building committee will be February 14th at 4:30 in the Wahconah Library. And that's where discussion around final cost or targeted cost will happen. In terms of information sessions, we have March 5th and 7th, and I have them written down here actually. March 5th at Wahconah at 5 p.m. Will be an information session. They run about an hour and a half, from 5 to 6:30, and then that same night at 7 o'clock, 7 to 8:30 at Windsor Town Hall. So that's March 5th. March 7th, we're going to start at 5 p.m. at Kittredge School in Hinsdale. And then at 7 p.m., we're going to be at Beckett Washington School. And we can kind of tailor the conversations, particularly around tax implications and so on and so forth, to those communities. And I think that'll be helpful. The vote is probably the most important thing, which is Saturday, April 6th. And I think one of the misperceptions about this whole project that we need to get out there is it's an all or nothing vote. You're either voting for a new school or you're voting to essentially do nothing. Those are the options. In the meantime, if you're still on the fence about how you feel about the project, we don't have any more scheduled tours. We've already done 3, but we may end up scheduling more tours, but you could just contact the school and get in touch with me, and I would be happy to take anybody, even if it was 1 or 2 people on a personal tour. I think that speaks volumes to why we need to do what we're doing.
All right, so for anyone who's interested in the going-ons of this new school building project, we recommend you come by on any of the aforementioned dates. And if you'd like a tour, contact Mr. Robb or someone involved in the school office.
All right, and now that we've talked to Mr. Robb, we wanted to go around to the different parts of the school and talk to some of the teachers that are teaching in different segments, such as gym teachers or science teachers, and let's go over to those right now.
All right, and we're here with Mr. Dahari of the science department here at Wahconah. So, Mr. Dahari, what are some of the biggest drawbacks of the room we're in right now?
Well, I think there's a lot of things that could definitely be improved about this room. One thing, as you notice where you're standing right here, this is a tiered classroom. Apparently in like the 50s or 60s, this was all the rage, lecture style, but it really prevents me from getting my students to work in groups because I can't really move the desks around at all. Because there's tiers. So the desks are higher than others, and it's just really weird. And also, I've had students trip on these things lots of times, walking into and out of the classroom. Because of the tiers, and because, as you can see, there's no space to do any activities, we're really limited to doing activities either in the hallways or in the lab. As far as the lab goes, it's difficult to get lab time because all the science teachers share the same one lab. So if a chemistry group is in there with their Bunsen burners, I don't want to be launching, tennis balls through the air because that is not a great mix. So we're usually relegated to going out in the hallway, which is okay, I guess, because we can spread out there, but we're always disturbing some other classroom. So it makes that a little bit challenging, and I kind of hold back, and I don't feel like I should be holding back in my teaching.
I agree.
Yeah.
It's a strange limitation for a school to have, especially nowadays.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it makes it pretty challenging to get some of the activities done. Physics is about motion in large part, and when you have no room to move, it becomes difficult to teach it, and it becomes difficult to learn it too.
All right, hello. I am here with Mr. Pike, and he's the teacher of various different technical classes that he does in Wahconah. And Mr. Pike, you do not teach in a typical classroom, do you?
I do not. I teach a variety of, from computer programming to video game design to robotics, computer building and repair, which is what is all around us right now. and I feel like I'm forgetting some other ones too, accounting and personal finance. So I have only a couple classes that would be in more of a traditional setting, and then everything else is more of a hands-on, needs a hands-on kind of atmosphere. And so the building we have is I essentially found a spot that was neglected. It wasn't used, and kind of made it more of a hands-on space, but it's pretty tough teaching down here.
So what would you say are like some of the most difficult parts that you have to deal with in this classroom? Like, what are the worst parts that you just have to maneuver around to be able to teach properly?
First and foremost, the heating. I'm in a spot in the school where there's really no insulation. The walls are metal, the floor is concrete, and the heaters do not work. And so in the class, I basically, if it's a cold morning, I actually have to come in and turn on all the computers to get residual heat to kind of bring the temperature up. So it's pretty difficult to kind of keep kids on task when they're shivering and they need to go get their coats. On the other side of the equation, when it's those warm days that we get, it gets painfully hot in here, and so and just airflow is a problem. The kind of retrofitting to be a hands-on place, it's a blessing and also a curse, because there's only so much room, and so the classroom space isn't really laid out to be a hands-on spot where you can actually put projects off to the side, and so another class comes in. And I think that's the biggest difficulty, is having a dedicated space where these hands-on classes can actually operate.
So the new school building plans to kind of work on this and make things better. Do you think that any of that will improve what your class has to offer?
I think so. I think it's for one reason is that it's going to be more of a dedicated space, and not only just the building, the classroom itself, but also the fixtures and furniture that will go into it would be more conducive to that teaching environment, instead of just trying to find things here and there that were, kind of left discarded in a classroom, and kind of going along that route. So it would be more conducive to to that setting, but also just having that dedicated space where I'm not worried about working in two rooms. I could have one large classroom that could fit everybody.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Pike.
And we're here with Mr. Walsh of the English department. He also works in the portables, which are two rooms that are slightly separated from the rest of the school in a trailer of sorts. So we're currently in one of those. So, Mr. Walsh, what would you say are some drawbacks and or positives that are offered by the portables, since they are so different?
Well, some of the nice things about it are, it's set back a little bit from the regular hallway, so, it is a little quieter, and the room tends to be a little bigger than some of the other rooms, which is nice. But unfortunately, there are some drawbacks, like the room next to mine, P2, the heat actually fluctuates in a really erratic way. Some days we come in, it's extremely cold. Other days, when they turn on the heat, it'll work for a little while and be very warm, and then kind of turn off. So it's kind of mercurial in a way. Mine doesn't operate as much like that. It's pretty much on a regular schedule as far as how I adjust the thermostat, but I see that being an issue over there. The floor tiles have been popping up for quite some time. There's kind of a line that goes down the room where they're kind of beginning to pop off one by one, so that's certainly one of the issues that we've encountered.
So there are a few problems with the room, but it's not dismal at all.
I wouldn't say so. I mean, we have flexible furniture that we just received, and obviously the technology that's available here is up to the same par as anywhere else in the building. So it's not as if I'm teaching in the Stone Age, but again, if I was next door in Mrs. Vertek's room, I could see a bigger effect on the students on a daily basis. I know one day I came in here to have my lunch, and she actually had her class in here because the room was so freezing next door that she transferred them over here because she knew I may not be in the room for that particular time. So little things like that that maybe I wouldn't be exposed to all the time, but are definitely taking place.
All right, thank you, Mr. Walsh.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, so I'm here with Mr. Rabuse, and he's the band teacher, among other things, at Wahconah. And Mr. Rabuse, what are some of the issues that you have with this room and the other rooms that you teach in?
There are many. Since we're standing in this room, I should probably point out, and maybe you can get a shot of this on the camera, that we have these risers that are built into the room. That makes this room impossible to do anything else in. We're stuck with this arrangement. I can't have a small jazz band set up over here. I can't move the choir in to do a combined work without moving a lot of stuff around. And it's very difficult to get all that percussion stuff down 3 stairs and through the doors. So that's one. We can't actually take this out, even if I wanted to, even if I had the money to do it. There's asbestos under this floor. So if I was to start knocking things out, I'd be exposing a lot of asbestos, so we just can't do that. It's also impossible to bring some of those larger drums out of the door because the door isn't wide enough. The way we get the drums out is we have to take the drums apart. We have to take the wheels off the bottom, adjust the pedal, and it has to go sideways, and it takes a while to get it out the door. So ideally, we would have a room that had a double door. It's just a simple little design, or just some way of being able to load out all of this stuff so we can do concerts. It's great to have that, out to the stage. Also, an exit to the outside, so that when we go to events like UMass Band Day and whenever we do a parade or go to Light of the Holidays, it's easy to load things out. We don't have a utility exit, and we really need one. In the auditorium, those chairs in there, they look new. There's a section of chairs in there that do look new, but they're not new. Those are old chairs that have been reupholstered.
Oh.
Yeah. The reason that we've had to reupholster the old chairs at the expense of about $300 per chair.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. Those chairs are mounted to screws that are in the cement. So the spacing of those screws is, well, it's fixed. You can't change it. And all of the chairs that are available now for replacement, if we were to buy new chairs from a vendor, they don't fit that size. That was a 1961 spacing that isn't used anymore. So we would have to put all new screws in and remove all of the old screws. And there's asbestos under there.
Oh.
So if we were to pull out all those screws and resurface so we could get new chairs, we'd be looking at $1 million asbestos removal project. We just can't do that. So what we've done is taken the old 1961 chairs, pulled out a whole row, and shipped them off. And they strip them out, they bang out as many dents as they can, they put new fabric on them, and they ship them back. And like I said, it's about $300 per chair. So the chairs that are in there that are done have been done with donations. There is the RASP project. There's a plaque out in the hallway. You can see that there was a real movement to get that done. But those chairs are falling apart. They're 1961.
Yeah.
We can't get new ones. We have to keep on refurbishing the old ones.
All right, and so what do you think that the new building will do really well for this new music production, anything that you have going on?
Oh, well, the music production thing, certainly. Updating the network, making a room that's a little more conducive to teaching music technology. I teach music production in a costume room. When the Wahconah building was designed, the room that I currently teach in now was a women's changing room. It has a sink, it has a place for hanging stuff up, costumes and makeup. And the other room, which I use, we call it the outer office. We have a computer in there, and we have some storage in there, and the band uniforms are in there. That was the men's changing room, again, for theater. So those rooms are not used for changing anymore. They're used for storing uniforms, for office storage, and for teaching music production. Miss Hoffman does not actually have a classroom. There is no choir room. Miss Hoffman teaches on the stage. So anytime she has her regular day, and we do an activity here at Wahconah that includes the auditorium, like an assembly or school pictures or a town meeting that they need to set up for on the stage, she gets kicked out of her classroom. And then she has to come in here. And we do the best we can. We're pretty flexible, and we make it work, but it's certainly not ideal.
Yeah.
The sketch for the new building includes a large ensemble room and a small ensemble room. And if that large ensemble room has a flat floor like it's supposed to, we would be able to have band and choir set up in here, configure the room however we want. We'd have a small ensemble room where I could teach guitar. We could have breakout rehearsals and sectionals. And then music production would ideally be taught in a computer room. Like if we had a room full of computers, like imagine Mr. Pike's room or Ms. Durkee's room, I could simply just walk down there, and there would be some high-powered computers where I could teach music production.
Yeah.
We do have Chromebooks one-to-one, right? But Chromebooks are meant to get on the internet and do stuff on the internet. You're not moving 16-bit stereo sound audio samples. You're doing some heavy lifting when it comes to music production and video production. And Miss Camponia was thinking of perhaps one day adding a Photoshop class. That would be wonderful. And of course, Photoshop has a music or a computer component to it, just knowing how to work it. But it also has an art component to it as well, like how to draw in Photoshop. That's a whole other thing, graphic design.
Yeah.
Very few professional graphic designers now are still pencil and paper, ink-based, right? Most of it is Photoshop. So if you can graduate from high school knowing your way around Photoshop, you're pretty well set up for a career in graphic design.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Rabuse.
Of course.
All right, and we're here with Coach Campbell of the Wahconah Gym and Physical Education Program. So, Coach, what do you think is some of the biggest issues with the locker room area and just the gymnasium in general?
Well, certainly the original part of that is the way it was built. So this school was built in 1961, or the first class that went through was 1961, and at that time, no female sports. The only female sport was cheerleading. And since then, we've had the laws change in which you have Title IX, in which equal access for men and women. And I think that really affects us for the new building in our locker rooms because women did not have the athletics. So now that we have just as many athletic sports and endeavors for the women as men, equal through Title IX, we need equal space for locker rooms, which is more of that. Also, as teams come in and compete, those of you that are in the fall especially, we have Agawam coming to play a football game. Meanwhile, cross-country run is in there. Soccer is in the same one. You have all the people trying to share those things. It's very difficult. So the locker rooms are going to be addressed, which is exciting. They're going to be more easily accessible to all our athletes and certainly more versatile in their usage. So that's great. The other thing is gym space. Our gym, according to the code in which MSBA is using, is small. So our gym is going to be larger at the new school, which I'm excited about. More space, more activity, more ability to do different things within the gym. So what it gives us here for our physical education and gym is that flexibility to do more activities in our gym space. And then on top of that, we're also going to have space for a weight room. We do not have a weight room here. We do not have anything to strength train here at Wahconah Regional High School. And if you go into many other high schools, they have different things within their gymnasiums or around their facility in which they can use for yoga. Right now we're doing yoga in the hallway, on the stage, wherever we can find room. And now we'll have a space for that. We'll also have a space for ellipticals, treadmills, stationary bikes, weights to strength train, benches, squat racks, stuff like that. So we'll be able to do much more with our physical education program. We are all very excited about that.
And you would say definitely so. There'll be more adequate spacing, more tools with which students can use to better achieve success. You won't have to do lifting out at the CRA and places like that. Correct. Women will have better locker room access. Would you say there are any specific design quirks in the current locker room or gym that definitely are problematic?
Yeah, sight lines, just to visually go in and supervise a locker room. If you walk into the boys' phys ed locker room, you got lockers outside of their showers. They're in nooks and crannies, and you can't see everybody. Plus, just the facilities in the bathroom, using the bathrooms for the boys, one urinal, one toilet for, I don't know, there's 500 and some odd kids here, 275 boys, half and half here and there, and visiting teams that come in. There's not much access there either. So, yeah, that's a definite problem.
And it definitely gets quite cold in the locker room, especially the boys' locker room.
Yeah, this building, unfortunately, we've had our pipes freeze a couple of times there in the boys' locker room. If you notice, the heater's on the outside wall. Mm-hmm. And so when it gets really, really cold, obviously all the hot water and the water has to flow through that heater on that outside wall. The outside wall is going to be the coldest wall. So I don't know how well designed that was.
So the systems aren't too effective, but the new school will tackle those problems.
Correct.
All right, well, thank you, Coach. So the new school will be able to offer all kinds of new opportunities in the gym program and overall improve the facilities that we will have now. And so, now with all our interviews complete and our information collected, as you've seen, we're going to go over it in a quick recap. And we're also going to talk about some tax numbers that were not given during the interviews because they were not known at that time. However, they are now. And so, we'll be telling them to you. Thanks to the Berkshire Eagle for getting us the information we're about to tell you. So, all these taxes are assumed to have a 4% interest rate over the 30 years that they will be paid. We'll be starting with the highest taxpayer, Dalton. Dalton residents, each one, will be paying about $560.76 more per year.
Peru will be paying $290.82.
And then Windsor residents will be paying about $252.45.
In addition to that, Washington will be paying $243.28.
And then Hinsdale residents will be paying $198.91.
Cummington will be paying $117.31.
And finally, Beckett will be paying $62.13 extra a year.
Now, these numbers are pretty much concrete, but they could change slightly depending on how much the state decides to reimburse in the end. It might change.
And as we mentioned, these will be being paid over 30 years, not just 1 or 2, but 30. And these numbers were gained not just off random. They didn't just decide, oh, we're going to have Dalton pay the most. Dalton pays the most because it supplies by far the most students, currently being 306 to Wahconah, whereas Beckett supplies as little as 23, so thus it pays less than Dalton would.
All right, and now that all of that is over, we would like to give a brief summary of what Mr. Robb had to say. According to him, the old design does not fit the needs of the modern student, and the renovation would be less cost-effective and would disrupt the student learning environment. The new design would offer superior teaching spaces, such as more labs for sciences, more rooms for art, and etc. However, the auto lab will be lost, and it is not known what classes will take its place. Offices such as the nurse's office, school psychiatrist, and even principal's offices will be a shared private space that Mr. Robb finds very important. The new school will be more compliant to the Americans with Disabilities Act as well.
Systems in the school will be improved. The heating systems that currently are not so great in the school will be better, and they will also add a new air conditioning system to the new school design.
New sports fields will be added, such as a lacrosse field, and the auditorium will be somewhat smaller, but will feature superior tech and spaces for those using it, such as designated changing rooms.
Yes, and outdoor accessibility is expected to be better in the new proposed design. Along with this, Mr. Robb has gone deeper into why he believes renovation is inferior to the new building project, and he stated a few things such as renovation would be less cost-effective through state funding. It would also take far longer than the school building project would. Another problem he brought up was that asbestos would be a problem, as when we renovate it, we would have to remove the asbestos. Not only is that expensive, but it takes a long time to do, and it can get in the way of students very much so. Now that we've recapped what Mr. Robb had to say, we're going to recap what the teachers had to say, starting with Mr. Dahari. Mr. Dahari mainly commented on his classroom's design. He stated that it just simply did not work for his teaching methodology. He would much prefer something that wouldn't require him to go out in the hall to carry out many of the different projects they do during his physics classes. He also noted that having multiple labs will be very useful for the various science classes.
Mr. Pike said that proper spaces for tech classes would eventually be provided, and there would be no more heating and cooling issues in his class, which would allow his classes to continue more smoothly, and it would allow for more space for hand-on activities.
Mr. Walsh mainly told us that the climate in the portables, mainly Portable 1 where he works, isn't so terrible. However, the floors are coming up, and the neighboring portable to his room, P2, is experiencing problems dealing with heat and cold. So a new school design would not experience such issues. He said that the conditions were not horrid, but improvements would be appreciated.
Mr. Rabuse said that his tiered band room will be fixed to allow for the combination of both the choir and band classes. This will increase mobility of heavy instruments and will allow him more flexibility. Music production classes will be given adequate space as well as chorus classes. The auditorium will also be brought to higher standards without having expensive asbestos problems being at the forefront.
And Coach Campbell finally gave us some information regarding the new gym design, starting with the locker rooms. He stated that proper locker room space will be given for both sexes, and in these locker rooms there will be better heating and cooling. Along with that, there will be more visibility for teachers to be able to see if there's any problems in the locker rooms, and if so, they can handle them better. As for the gym itself, it will be larger and can still be split like the current one. And finally, there will also be an exercise room actually added to the gym space, in which various exercise equipment will be installed that sports teams can use. To finish things up, we'll give you a quick, just overall recap of the situation. Taxes will rise in the different towns in accordance to property values and the students that they send. You can see the Berkshire Eagle article about this situation for more details regarding that. This new school will feature a host of fixes and new features as to better accommodate 21st century needs.
However, the district has already cost money with the introduction of their Chromebook program, which has caused tax increase in the past. We have no knowledge of whether a maintenance worker or team will be hired to maintain the building better than the current one, as nothing has been mentioned regarding that to our knowledge. No matter what, taxes will rise. It is all a matter of whether citizens want to pay less for necessary renovations that may be less cost effective, or more for a new school that would last longer.
One major issue that did come up actually during the development of this school building program was the geothermal heating system, which will not be appearing in the current design that they are proposing in early April. The issue regarding this is that a geothermal heating system, while more expensive straight away, may end up being cheaper over a long period of time. Also, this period of time may be made shorter by fossil fuels possibly, now this is all hypothetical, becoming more taxed in the near future. Many green laws are being passed in many nations, including our own, and so the chances of this are not very low. So that is a reasonable worry to have in mind, and thus this could be more costly in the future with the current fossil fuel-based heating system. In all, on this situation, you should all vote. It is a critical matter in our opinions. We believe that you should exercise your democratic power and give your voice on this subject. We hope you got something out of this video, and we are looking forward to seeing you in the next regular episode of Wahconah Weekly.